to Real Tax Talks. I have with us today Mario Fields, who is accomplished commercial real estate investor and has worked in the industry for over 20 years. Thank you so much, Mario, for joining me today. I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about yourself and kind of what brought you into real estate 20 somewhat years ago.
Yes, well, thank you, Michael, for inviting me and for the opportunity. And the simple answer to your question, as far as what brought me into real estate, was basically uh, when I looked at the opportunities that were available versus if I decided to try to start, with a company and work my way up. I said, well, this is an obvious no-brainer because at the time that I first got into real estate, it was right around the early 2000s, so around 2003, 2004. And I would say around that time, people were doing real estate, but they weren't really talking about it or engaged or excited. Um, and for the most part, everybody was focused on just mostly residential and single family homes. So not a lot of people were really talking about commercial real estate. And to my knowledge, I don't think too many people were talking about apartments. So, and then of course, you fast forward to 2008, and that's when a lot of people got crushed that were doing residential real estate and single family homes. And then you had a lot of those people that kind of converted over to commercial real estate. Um, and so in the commercial real estate arena, a lot of what happened in 2008, it did affect us, but not to the same degree because commercial real estate is not quite the same as residential.
Mhm.
And, the crisis that happened in 2008, for the most part, it was mainly residential real estate that really got slammed from what was happening. On the commercial real estate side, you could say it just made things take longer and things were delayed, but it didn't keep us at a standstill and stop us completely. On the other side, for them, a lot of them literally, you know, lost everything and had to pivot from something else. So that was interesting to watch. And many people can share a lot of war stories with you about that. But just to kind of fast forward from that time period up to the present, we've seen since that period, which I would say post 2008, there was um, a lot of volatility from various different things. Then, of course, in the start of this decade, 2020, you had COVID, and then after COVID, you had 2022, where there was a lot of volatility in the markets again. And then fast forward now, um, still got a lot of volatility, and then there's a war in Iran. So, um, things change, but they don't seem to change, if that makes sense.
We just so I know you talked about these things kind of going on in the world. Were these sort of kind of challenges that you experienced yourself that kind of were just things that you saw were happening that didn't necessarily impact you, and how did those things kind of shape your mindset to address the future issues as you mentioned that things change but they stay the same or continue to happen, right? Continue to have issues.
Yeah, that's a great question. And The short answer is actually it's a little bit of both, because you see what's happening, and just like what Warren Buffett said, when everyone is fearful, you get greedy, and when everyone is greedy, you get fearful. So it does caution your decision making and your judgment based off of some of the unknowns and the uncertainty, but it doesn't totally paralyze you. So the short answer would be it does impact your decisions and your forecasting, but it doesn't keep your business, like at a standstill.
Okay, that's that's a good way to kind of think about it. And as you know, as you kind of you see these things continue to happen, is there uh, are there any sort of ongoing discipline related challenges that you think require more attention today?
Absolutely. I would say probably the biggest challenge, if you want to call it that, would be how to properly implement but also navigate AI within real estate, because many people uh, are excited about it and enthusiastic about it, and they want to go 100% full in, which is excellent. But at the same time, what people sometimes don't realize is that real estate is a relationship business. So AI will be able to enhance your business, but at the end of the day, that person is still going to want to talk to a human being. They're not going to want to interact with a robot. So you kind of have to balance that out. You want to embrace and learn about AI and implement it in your real estate business, but you don't want to take away the essence of what makes real estate so engaging, which, like I said, is the interaction that you have with many different people and the relationships that you form and build. So AI can enhance your business, but you don't want to make AI to be the center of your real estate business and not have those key elements that will always be in real estate being taken away.
Yeah, I can completely see that. I mean, real estate and actually most business is a relationship. It's all built on relationships, and you know you might have spreadsheets and contracts and everything else, but the relationships are really kind of drive um, the results. And I definitely see. I think it's interesting as you mentioned, like going all in, because if you have like a fully automated bot that you expect humans to talk to and do like the closing and do everything, and you've never actually touched anything, then yes, I would agree with you. That's not the way to necessarily use the AI, because it's sort of that old adage of if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and so you don't necessarily want to jump there, but you want to make sure that you're using the hammer, or in this case AI, in the right places, and where it really makes sense. And I think so too. I think that's a challenge, and just like the different progressions have occurred, some in our, prior to our lifetimes and others within our lifetime, right? The change to typewriters, the change to computers, the change to having access to the internet, and all of these different progressions have just changed how the work has happened. And I think it creates more opportunity, kind of like what you're saying, because as opposed to that. So it's definitely, I think how do you use the tool to leverage the work, but still keeping the human aspect of it is definitely interesting. And I wonder, because I was going to ask you a little bit about, how you manage pressure and how you manage volatile periods. I wonder if there's an opportunity for AI to potentially not necessarily do the work, but provide kind of the insight into what are some volatile periods that might be happening, or how to manage some of the pressure that comes of this because of now having expectations of things that are going to be happening. How do you see that kind of playing out in the coming years?
Well, that's another great question. I would say that it will definitely help with forecasting and planning and a lot of uh, admin work, and it will enhance individuals' real estate business so that instead of them having to take several hours or several days to do underwriting or documents, it can be done quickly using AI. Of course, like I mentioned before, though, once you do get a deal to closing, uh, you still are going to be interacting with that buyer or that seller, and you still want to have that relationship intact. So I'll say something that is kind of a golden nugget, but it might get me in trouble, and it might cause us to go down a rabbit hole. But I'm going to say it anyway. So one of the one of the things that I've discovered in reference to uh, apartment owners within commercial real estate. This is more of a generalization. It's not um, not set in stone, but it's just on average. The individuals usually age range are somewhere between their 50s to as high as their 70s. So within that age group, some of them are on LinkedIn, but most of them are not.
Hmm.
Uh, you're talking about individuals that, for the most part, are from the baby boomer generation. So they still are used to old school stuff. And don't get me wrong, I think LinkedIn is wonderful and magical and great for your business. But if you're focusing on certain groups, you have to go where they're going to be at. And that age group, I can tell you, they definitely want a telephone call and they definitely want to meet you face to face.
Mhm.
Some of them don't even know who Claude is, so um, you lose them, or you might lose them if your entire business is focused on being on LinkedIn. And like I said, don't get me wrong, I think it's wonderful and magical, but you can't have that as the only tool, on your tool belt. Um, I would say in terms of commercial real estate investing and apartments more specifically, LinkedIn is good for those that are probably in their 20s and 30s that are just getting started. Um, that might happen to already have capital that want to just be like a silent partner or a passive investor, or might just want to uh, tip their toes in the pool a little bit and you know see what happens, being a part of a syndication or something like that, you know. But going back to what I was just saying, um, people in that age group that I mentioned from 50 to 70, some of them are grandfathers, so like I said, if you tell them something about Claude,
Yeah.
they're not they're gonna be like, well, who is Claude? you know, uh,
Jean-Claude Van Damme, that's no.
right, right. So it's really interesting and fascinating, but a lot of the if you want to call it old school techniques is what really captures that age group. Like I said, a phone call. Um, you know, email is good too, but not as good as a phone call. And definitely face-to-face interaction, that could be just going to get uh, coffee or something, or, going to meet up for brunch or whatever the case may be. That's, really how you win in that particular age group. Um, and like I said, some of them are, on LinkedIn, but a lot of them are not.
Yeah, that is actually true. I find the same thing. I have. It's funny because you went direct to apartment owners, and I'm just thinking that's exactly my clients fit into that category that you mentioned, age group and everything. So I definitely have seen that. But I do agree that there are there's folks who aren't really on LinkedIn, and I think there's people who are on there more passively. So it's not the only place, absolutely. And I think that's true of not just LinkedIn, but any digital marketplace or any digital thing. You got to go out there and kind of shake hands and meet people eye to eye and face to face and have conversations and whether informally through a networking or through some sort of event, conference, matchmaking. It just gives you the opportunity to speak to these people and kind of learn a little bit more about them. And them to learn about you and they because they're not used to press one to confirm your appointment, right? They liked when Mary from the doctor's office would call, so it definitely does take a different time. But on the flip side, I do think LinkedIn has some benefits because even if where you don't know folks in real life, or if you do, it gives that from a professional aspect a way of people to still keep in sync with you and what's going on with you and your business. So I'm sure if you've raised capital, it's nice as people kind of hear about what are the different projects that you're involved with or have had success with, so that they think of you in the future. So I think that there's a lot to be said about that because it makes it much more efficient. And since it's not being pushed to people like emails and things like that, they're more so pulling that information down when they want it. I feel like it's sometimes a little better received. But there's definitely, I think it's the same thing, kind of going back to the AI thing. It's a tool. It's not shouldn't be your only tool uh, in the arsenal, and there's definitely opportunities there. uh, kind of kind of shifting gears, and I just kind of talked a little bit about capital and how what have you done in the past for raising capital, and what kind of mistakes have forced you to rethink exactly how what your capital strategy is.
Yeah, that's another excellent question. I would say typically uh, what stands out would be if I have a really great deal, but there's an issue with raising capital, then I usually have to reevaluate the deal um, and consider if something might have been overlooked, underwriting the deal, because clearly the investors that I'm trying to pitch this to don't see it as a great deal. So that would be the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say would be being able to present the sizzle and the sauce. So investors, for the most part, they just want to know their bottom line. When am I going to get my money back? How long is it going to take? What are the challenges? And what happens if the deal goes south? So, if you're able to kind of answer those questions within that 30-minute presentation, you've pretty much checked off the boxes, And I would say the third thing would be just going back to underwriting is this is where, you can kind of get kind of nerdy and wonky, where you have to make sure that all the numbers, have been double and triple checked. Nothing was overlooked. A common mistake that happens in commercial real estate investing, um, and this is no disrespect to commercial real estate brokers and agents, but oftentimes their information from their brochures are information that they got directly from the seller. And those numbers, I hate to say this, but almost 100% of the time are not accurate. So you have to do a very, very good job of your own due diligence
Mm.
to make sure that the numbers properly align, because the seller wants to sell his property, the commercial real estate agent or broker wants to sell the seller's property so they can get their commission and move on. So they're already aligned with, trying to sell the sizzle, but
Right.
when you kind of like an onion, when you peel away the layers, you start to uncover different things. And usually you start to see the real numbers. And oftentimes they don't look as tantalizing as what's on the brochure. So that is a major, major thing that you have to be aware of, because otherwise, I mean, it could, get you burned where you're losing not just thousands, but possibly millions of dollars on the deal.
Absolutely, yeah. I've seen many of those brochures, and I think they're very much using an optimist lens, and don't account for sometimes for the reality, and maybe not the reality of what ends up happening for the buyer, right? Because property taxes will change, insurance will likely change, so there's a lot of factors that will be adjusted. Yeah, there's a yeah, that's why you have to surround yourself with folks who know what they're doing, and work with folks who can help guide you in that process. It's really, really, really great tidbits. Thank you for that. And so you go into these deals and you underwrite them and you sell the sizzle and the sauce, right? And you're kind of, how do you handle, or what are your thoughts on planning for the exit in terms of tax? Are you thinking about the tax outcome going into the deal and how you can minimize it? Or are you thinking kind of further down the line of, well, we'll figure it out when we get there. We figure out how much money we make. And then, what have you, and I guess that's the first part. I'll ask that.
Oh yeah, that's a really good question as well. Well, personally, I always have that in mind in terms of how I'm planning not just the exit strategy, but also the how I'm going to structure the deal. Um, because at the end of the day, as much as I love Uncle Sam, um, I don't want to give away my entire treasure chest to him. So it's always top of mind for me. And I know that that's also what sellers are thinking about as well, because, for a lot of them, they're trying to retire, they're trying to liquidate their assets. And, in some cases, they might be downsizing or moving overseas or whatever the case may be. So it's definitely top of mind. And I would say that having a good CPA or tax advisor on your team is just as essential as having a good lawyer on your team, because you're going to need both. Um, some in some cases more so than others. Um, but it's critical that any investor have that top of mind, because you don't want to close on a $1 million deal and then you don't realize that, wait a minute, you have to pay taxes on this $1 million deal that you just closed on.
Yeah, I think it's, what's your ultimate uh, gain, right? After tax, right? Because sometimes there's, kind of going back to those shiny brochures, things that sound really great on the surface, but as you kind of go on your internal underwriting, which may include, what are the tax consequences, or what's the taxable nature of this transaction, you look at it and say, well, gee, this makes less sense because you'll end up making more on the top line, but less on the bottom line once you've paid taxes and potentially other expenses. So there's definitely some great things. Uh, do you have any anecdotes for any of these? I mean, we talked kind of generally. Do you have any stories, any fun stories you'd like to share about things that have happened on either taxes or capital, or exciting things in your world?
Oh, sure. I've got many, many stories I could tell. I would say uh, probably the one that I probably will never forget is well, two different stories, but I'll tell them very quickly. So one particular deal that I had, it happened right around the time that Hurricane Harvey hit in Houston. So it was a deal that was actually right about to close, and so we didn't close for nearly 3 or 4 months because of that happening. And then another story is there was like this weird winter storm that came through Houston uh, in early 2021, and knocked out power and everything. Same situation. I was about to close on a deal, and that happened, and uh, it took again almost 3 or 4 months before we could close because, mind you, this was also during the peak of COVID, and the city literally got hit with this strange winter storm, which is odd for Houston, to have a winter storm. And I mean, it was just terrible. But I can laugh about it now. At the time, it was not funny.
So, so it sounds like your stories are all weather related. So be wary of the weather. It could impact. It could delay. You know, it could delay your closing. So just maybe to be ready for it in the future, right? Hey, if there's a major weather event, this is going to delay closing 2, 3, potentially 4 months. But I mean, it sounds like that at least these are deals that went through in the end. So it wasn't that they were, totally dead because of the weather event. They were just delayed. So the
Exactly. Well, the thing about it is that with a delay of 3 to 4 months, that basically changes a lot of the numbers because, you're basing everything off of everything happening on this day, and it doesn't happen. So you've got to go back and redo everything with the numbers because now you've got all of these other things that have happened that you've got to factor in. So yeah, that was the beauty, was that the deals did finally close. It just got delayed, and I guess the cautionary tale that I would say to any investor would be, sometimes, you can't plan for the unforeseen, but I would say in this day and age, there's probably four major things that could happen that you can't necessarily plan for. One would definitely be an unforeseen war. The other thing would be weather. The other thing would be a major recession. And then probably the fourth thing would be where something happens to either the seller or the buyer that forces, that deal not to happen, you know. Um, Most of those four things that I just mentioned, there's really no way to plan for it. It just happens, and then once it does, you have to recalibrate.
mm, yeah, yeah, yeah. They are there. There's a. You're right. It's uh, part lugging them on. It's, I think, moments where kind of having discipline having patience, and then of course obviously coming up with a winning strategy. Absolutely, that will go a long way to making those successful. Well, Mario, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you, learning a little bit more about your commercial real estate endeavors and challenges, as well as some really interesting tidbits and nuggets that I think will be useful to our listeners. Thank you so much, Mario, for joining me today, and I wish you all the best. Take care.
Alrighty. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.